Welcome, everyone, and thanks for joining me today. I'm Lorna Schumann with the Illinois State Museum, and today we're at the Research and Collection Center. That's the place where we house a lot of the objects that the museum is entrusted to take care of. But it's also a place where we do research and learn to understand a little bit more about the objects and what we can learn from them. But today we get a rare opportunity to go behind the scenes in the geology range. That's the place where rocks and fossils are kept. And we're going to get to look at fossils, and we're going to get to talk with our curator of geology, Dr. Mel Hardy. And I think she might have something special to show us. Are you guys ready? Let's go. Hi, Mel.
Oh, hi, Lorna.
How are you today?
Pretty good. How are you?
Well, great. Hey, today I'm bringing and really want to talk about fossils and a little bit about what we have here. What can you tell us about fossils and why we have them at the museum?
I love those questions. So the main reason that we have the collections that we do and the reason that we collect fossils and keep them here at the museum is because short of building a time machine, fossils are the direct evidence we have for past life. And so if anybody's interested in studying past life, they need those fossils to study. We have here at the Illinois State Museum one of the best and largest collections for what are called quaternary fossils. So these are Pleistocene and Holocene age fossils in the Midwest. And so we've got this very large collection here of these animals. And we get researchers that come to visit us pretty often, and they need access to our fossils. And so that's one of the services that we provide here at the museum, is allowing scientists to come into the collections and work directly with these fossils. The other purpose that fossils in our collection serve is also, of course, for education and exhibits. And so the public also gets to see these fossils quite often as well.
Mel, that is so cool. I love being in this range with all the fossils and seeing things that were left from long ago. Yeah. But you know, I heard that you have something really cool to show us that just came in this last summer.
Yeah, we definitely do. But to show you that, I need to take you to our prep room because that's the first place that fossils go when they come into this building. So let's head over there.
Awesome.
So welcome to the Illinois State Museum Geology Fossil Prep Lab. This is where we bring specimens to repair them, care for them, work on their conservation, and get them ready to stay in permanent storage for the long term, and also to be handled by researchers when they come to visit our collection. The fossil that I'm going to be showing you today is this very nice bison skull that was brought to our attention back in July. But before I get too much into this specific specimen, I want to talk to you a little bit about what we do first when we discover that there's a fossil that needs to be excavated. And the first thing we do is we don't move it. The very first thing we want to do when we learn about a new fossil that's out in the field is we want to collect as much information about it as possible. And this is why it's important to have a trained professional handle these kinds of recoveries. So the most important tools that I have as a paleontologist, I'm holding them here in my hands. This is my trusty notebook where I write all of the information that I observe when the fossil is still in place in the ground and take notes about the process of actually removing it from the ground. I also have here in my notebook a scale bar. And so this is something I include in every picture that I take of the specimen so that I know exactly how big the specimen is when I'm documenting it. The other information that we collect is what is the sediment type that the fossil is found in, what environment are we in, am I in a stream bed, am I in a canyon? I also record, this is a GPS unit, so I use this to record the latitude and longitude of where I am in space so I can plot where this is on a map. And then This specimen was partially in the ground, and so when a specimen is in the ground, what I'll do is I'll use my geologic compass to measure the direction it's pointing, and also if it's maybe plunging into the ground, I'll measure that angle as well. And I record all of this in my notebook. And so then I can come back to that data and learn from that information that I've collected. So once we have all that information collected, what we would ideally do is take our time, carefully digging around the specimen, slowly removing it from the sediment. And these are ideal conditions. Unfortunately, with this particular specimen, we found out about it. It was in a public area on state property. It was visible, and it was in a stream bed, and we were about to get a very large rainstorm. So we had to actually act very quickly. And so what we did is we put together a small team to immediately go out there and recover this skull. It was in loose gravel, which was easy to dig, and so we dug around it as carefully as possible after collecting the information. We searched around the skull to see if there were any additional bones. There weren't any present with this skull. And then we carefully lifted it and put it in a tarp and then hand carried it back to our vehicle to bring it back to the collection center. And once it was here, we started the process of conserving it for its long-term storage. One of the first things we did was actually cleaned it and allowed it to dry. When this specimen was found, it was nearly fully buried. So the part that I'm showing you here, this is the back of the skull that's showing in this part of the picture. And then this horn was peeking out from the sediment as well. So when we got there, we actually weren't sure how much of the skull we were going to get. And we were very, very lucky because it turns out the majority of the skull was actually there. The interior of the skull was completely full of that gravel that was in the bank of the river. And these bags here are what we pulled out of the inside of this skull. One of the things we discovered as we were removing the gravel from the interior is that it was actually doing a lot of the work, actually holding some of the skull together. So it became apparent as we were cleaning it and drying it that some of the pieces were pretty fragile. So what we started doing after it was dry is we applied what's called a consolidant. So this is a substance you apply to the bone that penetrates it a little bit and keeps it from breaking. It makes it a little bit harder. We also had to reattach this portion of the skull here. This is the orbit, so this is where the eye of this animal was. So not every fossil needs to have a whole lot done to it, generally cleaning, a little bit of maybe consolidation. And we are still working on this specimen, and the next thing that we want to do for it is actually create a custom-made support jacket for it to stay in when it is in permanent storage. And so the purpose of this support jacket is essentially to protect this specimen from gravity. Fossils have a tendency to be both heavy as well as fragile. And so if they just sit out under their own weight, there is a chance that over time, gravity will cause some fractures to occur in the specimen and it might break. So that jacket will be custom made for this specimen. It's made out of fiberglass and plaster. And yeah, so that will help hold the specimen up as it sits on the shelf. And it will keep it looking nice and intact for an extended period of time. And that's the whole purpose of all of these things that we do here at the Research and Collection Center, is to ensure that these specimens will be in our collection for a long period of time. So people will be able to study them as well as enjoy them as long as possible. And so that's really the purpose of this building. And one of the reasons it's a good idea to keep fossils in museums. We have the people, the knowledge, the equipment, the facilities to keep these specimens in very stable conditions where they will not deteriorate over time. And these specimens are important for a couple of different reasons. They are the most direct information that we have about living things in the past. And if somebody wanted to study life in the past, they come and look at these fossils. And so this is an important resource for researchers. It's also an important resource for education and exhibits. And so we want to make sure that these are things that scientists can study, but also that the public can enjoy for a long period of time.
Mel, thank you so much. I really appreciate you spending time with us. This is just totally fascinating to see the behind the scenes, really looking at what happens and going from that in July to this now is incredible. But I noticed there's also a name tag here.
Oh, yes. This is Carl. So as I mentioned, this skull was found on state property, and it was found by a gentleman just walking along the riverbank, and he found it. He knew what to do. He called me up and he said, I found what I think is a bison skull. And his name was Carl. And so sometimes when we find really nice specimens or very complete specimens of large animals, we might name them if they're important and significant. So what I did is I named it after the person who found it. And so this is Carl the bison. And that's how we're going to be referring to him going forward.
Very cool. Thank you so much. Can't wait to see when this goes on exhibit. It'll be really great. And this is just amazing.
It's a really nice piece. And it is unusual to get a skull that's this complete. And it would be really nice to share it with the public.
Yeah, you can really see the textures and everything on the fossil. It makes it more interesting.
It is really nice.
Great. Well, thanks again, Mel, so much. I really appreciate your time today. And thank you for joining us. I hope you learned a little bit more about what goes on with fossils behind the scenes before we actually get to see them on exhibit. Thanks for joining us.